Hey, ladies, we are so excited that you are joining us today. We have a super special guest that is really dear to my heart. Her name is Dr. Barbara Byers. Hi, Barbara.
Hi,
Hi,
Barbara.
Holly. Hi, Nicole.
Sweet Nicole. Okay, so I'm going to just I want to get right to the meat with Barbara because she is just pure gold. So I'm going to give you a little bio info about her so you can know how legit she is because she is legit. And then we're going to just jump right into some goodies from the Lord. So
Yes.
Barbara is actually a counselor, and she actually has her doctorate in counselor education from Regent University. She is just recently retired from a 20-year counseling practice, which I think is incredible. She is an author, a speaker, a seminar leader, a podcaster as well. And she just really believes in the transformative power of God's abiding presence in everyday life. Barbara actually lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and has her 4 adult children that are all across Texas and her 11 grandchildren,
Oh
which
my
is a
goodness.
whole lot.
Oh,
But you can catch her 15-minute podcast wherever you listen, YouTube. And also both are under, oh my gosh, y'all.
You be
Both
you. It's all good. Yeah.
are on YouTube. Blah.
Yes.
She will also be coming out with a book this year called The Voices of the Soul, The Song of Transformation. I just wanted y'all to
Ooh.
know all of that before we started. But
Okay.
how cool is
I'm
that
like,
title?
I didn't know some of those things. So that was great. In the book. Okay. I love it.
hopefully
Transformation.
spring. Hopefully this spring. So we'll see.
I
Yeah.
can't wait to get my hands on that. So Barbara, also one more thing. She's actually a lot of the reason why I went into my counseling. She saw me when I was 18 in high school when I was giving my parents a little trouble and worked with my family. And then I actually saw her
Oh,
not that long ago, just for a little visit. But she's just truly a gift to everyone she meets.
yeah. What I remember from those days, in your teenage years, quite a while back, is kind of giving you a voice, you finding a voice, the right
Yes.
with your parents. And that's so important for women to find their voice. It's
Yes.
beautiful. It's what God's created us for. So
That's so
yeah.
good. That's so good. Okay. So today I asked Barbara if we could talk a little bit about grief and just loss and what that looks like as a believing woman and just how to navigate that a little bit better. She is just a wealth of knowledge about these things. And so I thought it would be helpful just to let her share really whatever is on your heart, Barbara, about navigating grief, walking through loss, and staying faithful and faith-filled through it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I apologize for my little bit of hoarseness here, just getting over something. I think, and I know your podcast is helping women who are walking through infertility or miscarriage or even loss of a child. And so I think that is a very, very specific kind of grief.
Mm.
We as women are so beautifully designed by God in our feminine, and we really are pointed toward whatever we're doing, but we're always pointed toward relationship, toward nurture. We are defenders and protectors of relationship, and um, and we want babies. It's just in our nature. I would say most women. Now, some, there's a different call on their lives, but we are those who hold and protect life.
It's good.
And so when we feel ready for that, and we're not able to see that happen immediately or after a time or after a long time, or we get pregnant and there's loss. I know I have 4 children, living children, but I had 3 miscarriages as well. And that's a particular kind of loss. And so um, we um, we can sometimes feel like even our own body has betrayed us. You
Mhm.
know, and we can even get into this, what's wrong with me and why can't I have a child or hold a child in my womb? And it just because grief is about love and loss and longing,
Mm.
we can feel such a deep bereavement, such a deep longing and loss when we can't get pregnant or it's taking a long time, or when we've been pregnant and there's been a loss. I mean, just in our heart, it's almost like we feel bereft. You
Mhm.
know, it's not just about the loss and the love and the longing. It's also that we feel lost, and we can begin to say, who am I and what am I about? And the question we always ask in our pain, why is this happening to me? And it can be confusing and it can be lonely. And I love that y'all are doing this because it closes some of that loneliness gap. I'm not here out alone. I'm not lost in some wilderness. There are other women who are experiencing this, other couples, and they understand and they're speaking into this. And I'm feeling part of a community, which is really significant for our suffering and our healing when we have community and when we have support. It's one of the key things that we need. And I've listened to y'all's podcast before, and it's just so fresh and delightful and fun, as well as, deeply encouraging. So, on this side of grief, shoot, we're just not going to understand it. We're not. And part of our longing to understand it is, well, for one thing, we're meaning making creatures, right?
Mhm.
God made us that way. So we always want to understand, what's happening. But the other part of wanting to understand is if I can understand it, maybe I can get a handle on it, or let's just use that word control.
Mm.
Maybe I can
Yeah.
control it a little
Yeah.
better. And so I'm
Yes.
trying to make sense of it and I'm stumbling around through it. But God knows right where we are and right what we're in. And it is his heart to walk with us through it. It's his heart to give us peace and strength and joy. And for us to remember his name is Emmanuel,
Mm.
God with
Yes.
us.
That's
That's so
To
good.
me, that is the answer to all of it. And I know it can sound simplistic, but in our suffering, and this is a particular kind of suffering, that he is with me, that he created me, that he knows. There's a verse in Isaiah 40, I think it says, you said, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, but our way isn't hidden from the Lord. And that was written by a man going, do you see? Do you know? And then he goes on to say, do you not know? Have you not heard the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth? He doesn't
yes.
grow weary. His understanding is inscrutable, and he'll give strength to the weary. So he does know, and Emmanuel is with us, and he will enter in to our suffering with us.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful part. Does he lift it off like we wish, like we want,
Yes.
well, sometimes, you know,
Mhm.
is it guaranteed? No. Is our understanding guaranteed? No. But is his presence promised? Is it guaranteed? Oh, yes. And it's not a matter of always feeling it, but it's a matter of practicing his presence. I know you're with me. I don't get it. I don't understand. And I'm hurting so bad, but you're with me. And I love some of the people in the Bible who just lay it out there. I mean,
Mm.
goodness, when I've been in times of suffering, I stay in the Psalms.
Mm.
David went through so many different things and he sort of put himself through some of that, like we do. We create some of our own stuff, but it's all there. He lays it out. And I think it's in Psalm 62. It says, pour out your heart to the Lord. So, one of the things we need to do, we're in these places of grief and questioning, is we need to keep a spiritual journal. We need to draw in it, we need to
Good.
write it, and it needs to be raw and unedited. We can
Mhm.
scream, we can laugh, we can go,
Yeah.
I'm beating my fist on your chest, God. It just hurts so much, I don't know. But
Mm.
another, David is beloved in the Psalms, another guy who's pretty unusual is, excuse me, Jeremiah. So,
Mm.
yeah, God called him to some strange things and some real suffering. And so we
Mm.
get to the 15th chapter of Jeremiah, and he said something so evocative and so poignant. He says, "Why is my pain perpetual and my wound incurable,
Mm.
refusing to be healed?" And really, it's if you read those verses, it's couched in with some accusation toward God. You
Mm.
deceived me, and all this stuff. But we can feel that way, women with infertility or waiting, um, waiting and waiting, or just having suffered the loss of miscarriage and so on. It can feel like my pain is perpetual and my wound is incurable. I just don't see any way for this to be healed. And then we can go off into avoidance, which wouldn't we all like
Mhm.
to avoid pain? We have all
Yes.
kinds of ways of doing avoidance, yes, and addictions. Um, um, I know after one of my miscarriages, I gained a whole lot of weight. I just think I ate my pain for a while. And,
Mhm.
um, but God calls us back to something. And what he says in answer to Jeremiah, I think is remarkable because I think, okay, God, man, he's just laid it out there. And this man is just suffering moment by moment. What are you going to say to him? I think you're going to explain this and tell him how great it's going to be. So we're in Jeremiah 15, I don't know, about verse 19. And God says to Jeremiah, this little phrase that has stuck with me for years. He said, "If you will extract the precious from the worthless."
Mm.
And it reminds me of Isaiah saying, talking about the hidden treasures of darkness. And so it's like Jeremiah reached down into that painful mess where you don't see any light right now. Reach down and pull up the pearl, extract the precious from the worthless.
It's good.
And I'm wearing both of my pearl rings today.
Oh.
Put those on because God, he wants to give his daughters his pearls. He doesn't leave us alone in our suffering. We don't always understand it. We can't avoid it, but he has purpose in it. And if we're willing to stay the course and say, "I hate this, but I trust you. I don't understand, but I surrender. I don't know where it's going, and I want this so much. I want this. My longing and my yearning is palpable, but you're greater, and I trust you more, and I long for you more." We're going to see the Lord move. So there was a quote, and I know I'm doing all the talking, so y'all interrupt me if you want to,
No, we're listening. I am
Mhm.
loving this.
because I can go on and on. No,
Please do.
so uh, uh, we grieve because we've loved,
Mhm.
and when we invest love, there's always that possibility of loss. There's always that passion, that can go
Yes.
unrequited. And let me see if I can find this. Real quickly. Oh, yeah, let me just go to Job for a second because he's another one. Woo, woo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Heavy grief. Job in Job 6 says, "If only my anguish could be weighed and
Mm.
my misery be placed on the scale." What a picture. If
Wow.
I could take my heart, and you see how heavy it is. And there can be such heartache in this. But a chapter later, he goes on talking about his misery and tossing and turning all night, and it's just this deep futility. And he says, he calls it anguish of spirit.
Mm.
What a word, that misery that has just turned into such anguish. And he says, and he let his grief take him into hopelessness for a while and into self-pity. And I've done that. And
Mhm.
it's really, I had somebody call me out on it one time. I was like, "But I'm just grieving. And then later I took it to the Lord and he said, like, they're right. You have
Mm,
spiraled down into self-pity, and self-pity is about entitlement.
mm,
It's narcissistic. It's, oh man, my pain. And it's, I don't deserve this. I'm entitled to something better than this. But we're all going to have suffering, and it humbles.
mhm.
Anyway,
Yes.
he says, my days come to an end without hope. This is Job being pretty dramatic in the 7th chapter. And he goes on for 20 chapters like this. If you read Job
Yeah.
recently, it's like,
It's really in it.
I just want to skip to the end. But the last chapter is worth it all, right? Because
Mhm.
he says, oh, I mean, his children died. He
Mm,
lost everything financially. Even his wife was like, oh, curse God and die. His friends kind of go nuts on him. And he says at the end, I heard about you, and I thought I know you, but
mm.
now my eyes have seen you. It's like,
That's
now
good.
you took me through this, and you didn't really spare anything, but now I see who you really are. And then we see this enormous restoration, children and goats and sheep and all this stuff. But he discovered who God was. I'm still looking for that quote. Give me just a minute.
No, I love you talking about grief as
Uh-huh.
a sign of love. Someone said that to me after our miscarriage. They said, "The
Yeah.
sign of great grief is great love." And that kind of just shifted instead of focusing on the emptiness of grief, that took me to the fullness that comes with the love side of it, which I think
Beautiful.
is so sweet.
Yes. And we don't lose that love. I
Yeah.
still think of, I felt like I had 3 sons in the miscarriage, and
Mm,
I still think of them. And you know what a mama needs?
mm.
She needs to know who her children are.
Yes.
I know where those boys are, and
Yes.
know who they're with, and I know the safety and the joy, and that someday I'll be with them. So I found it.
Okay.
This is from Annie.
No, no, ma'am.
Oh, well,
Oh,
okay. You had something to say there.
it's all good.
This is
Yeah.
from Annie Lamott in Traveling Mercies. And she says, grief ends up, and we don't get over it. We don't move on. Grief is about adapting, accepting the loss, making new meaning from it. Grief ends up giving you the 2 best things: softness and illumination. So she's saying
Ooh.
tenderness of heart and light. So let me go on. And it really does. Suffering tenderizes something in our heart if we let it have its way and we keep trusting and laying our heart before the Lord. So, Shauna Niequist, who wrote a book recently, I guess I haven't learned that yet. I like what she said about the illumination piece, the light. Look for the good, even in the dark, especially in the dark. Once you train your eyes for tiny glimpses of goodness, you'll get better at seeing them, and you'll see more and more and more. And they'll keep you company and keep your heart tender. She's coming back to the softness, the tender. We're looking for the light. They'll keep your heart tender as you long for daylight, because it is the dark night of the soul sometimes.
Yes.
Choosing to see the good right in the middle of the darkness and loss is a discipline, but a life changing discipline.
That's so good.
So I keep surrendering. I keep saying, I get up in the morning and I choose you. I choose you. I remember years ago, a friend, she had tried every way to get pregnant with the baby. They ended up adopting 2 children later. But there was a time when she knew it was over, and she didn't get out of bed for a week. A week. She didn't shower. She didn't wash her hair. She didn't do she didn't do anything, because she knew that was the end of something, and she had to go through the process of grief. And one of the things grief does, it's been created by God, as a healthy process, a process to keep us healthy. It's the process of accepting what is. This is real. This suffering is real, and it's mine. I don't want it. Gosh, I'd like to avoid it and wish it away, but it's mine. But accepting it, processing through the grief with the myriad of emotions and the myriad of different ways of processing, unique to all of us, coming to places where we let it in more and more, we accept it more and more, and incorporating it in where we can make it part of our narrative so it has meaning to us. We've got to do that. And He's always helping us tell our story aright. It takes a while for us to become objective, making it part of our story. And then now we are in a place where we can accept new things coming in. Right? We're ready for some new things. The loss is there, the love is there, the longing's there, but it's not so intense. And we're able to be a little more resilient, and we're able now to open ourselves up like my friend did. Okay, can't do that. What's the future? What can I do? Well, today I can
Yes.
get out of bed maybe and wash my hair, and call
Yes.
a friend. Today I can think about something new with my husband. Today I can say, Father, you haven't left me. What do you have? You're still writing my story. What do you have? And what promises are still alive that I'm to keep taking hold of, right?
I love that.
Yeah. How are we doing on time?
I could just listen to her all day long.
I know. Me too. Me too.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you, Barbara. That was so good.
Yeah, you're welcome. Do I have a little more time, or are we?
Yes.
Are
I'm
we?
like, go. Yes. We're going to go
Okay.
for it.
All right. So, you've probably heard some research that was done, and they took that research, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she did it with a certain segment of the population. And then, then it got taken in and staged as the 5 stages of grief, which she never intended and really isn't true. They're parts and pieces of grief. So let me just talk a little bit about the task of grief. And grief is very like waves in the ocean. You're sitting there at the edge, maybe even enjoying, the beach,
Yeah,
and
you think you're floating.
you think you're, yeah, you think you're doing, and all of a sudden, what you don't expect, a big one comes in and just threatens to engulf
Mm,
you. And I think
that's good.
our natural tendency is, I'm going to fight it. Oh my gosh, I got to get up for air. I'm going to fight it. When actually, if we would let it overcome us and relax into it, the
Mm.
wave would just take us out a little way and deposit us, right? And I think grief is very much those unexpected waves. Sometimes something will trigger it. You're talking to a friend who just got pregnant, you're driving down a street and remember something, but a lot of times nothing triggers it.
Mm,
It's just come up in our heart. And if sometimes, granted, occasionally, where I'm standing on the frozen food aisle in Tom Thumb and I can't just sob, right? And so I pull myself together, and at the first opportunity, I schedule a grief time. We
mm,
actually can schedule that. Like, I'm going to get the kids in bed, or I'm going to do whatever.
that's a
I'm going
good
to take
idea.
I'm going to get in the car, and I'm going to sit with my journal, and I'm going to bring those feelings back up.
Mm,
And sometimes I need to scream. Sometimes I need to cry. Sometimes I need to acknowledge the hot anger that can be part of grief, that can make me feel so powerful sometimes, because anger is pretty powerful. But and some people are more, just emotionally expressive. Some people are more modulated. They're more thinkers. And we have to allow everyone, and often male and female will be quite different.
Mhm.
Cause issues in marriages. Oh, you're not grieving. And he's thinking,
Mhm.
I am grieving. I'm
Yeah.
just at a deeper place inside. Maybe you're more expressive. So we need to give people their own place and how they express that, you know. So instead of these like acceptance, bargaining, sadness pieces that Kubler Ross found, William Worden suggests 4 tasks of grief.
Hmm.
I really like that because grief is it. There is some task, and if we avoid
Yeah.
them, we're going to get stuck someplace. I have had clients over the years who were stuck. Their mother died at 12,
Mhm.
or they had a sudden move and a loss of their dad's income, and no one helped them understand it. No one helped them grieve it as children need to grieve. And so they may come, like I can remember one lady, she came quite depressed. And after a while, I said, you know, let's look and see if there's some losses in your life
Hmm.
that you haven't grieved. I'm not sure this is depression. I think this is grief trying to find a way up. And so we did a loss line, and a loss line is simply you can just do it like on a you can tape some paper together, you know, and you start back at when your mother was pregnant with you.
Mhm.
Maybe her father died when she was pregnant with you. Ooh, that's a loss that you don't remember, but you somehow took in utero her she grieved.
Mhm.
Maybe maybe at 4 you had your dog died and you had to bury it, okay? And then maybe at 7 you had to move out of a neighborhood with all where all your friends were and go to a different school. And, you know, at 15, a grandparent died or parents divorced. And so you do this loss line and you record it, but you also record 2 other things with it. You record, what do I remember about that time that I experienced and felt? That may not be quite so easy when you were younger, but, you know, maybe it's just enough to say, felt confused.
Mhm.
All these adults were ignoring me, or they were all crying, you know, whatever it was. So, what happened? What did you feel and experience? And the third thing is, who helped you
Mhm.
to you? Who was there for you?
It's good.
I know this one lady, I talked to her mother, and I think she was 11, and everybody had believed for her mother's healing, and then
Mhm.
and and nobody kind of explained it all to her. Her dad was a kind of a quiet, passive man. And she was just like, you know what happened to my life?
Mhm.
And then in her 30s, we were bringing that up and processing. And of course, the Lord met her in that. He loved to meet in that. So, some tasks and grief. I got off track. Sorry. Number one, got a little bit
It's
holding
okay.
up. Normal has just shifted,
Mm.
and we don't want to let go. But gradually, we begin to accept the reality. There's loss and normal has shifted.
Mhm.
Love kind of, where's that love going to go now? Right. Okay.
Mhm.
Number 2, we experience fully and acknowledge the pain of the loss.
Mhm.
So grief has its own timetable, it has its own waves. So we honor our grief. We
It's good.
honor that grief. Someone said, when we don't intentionally grieve, we often unknowingly allow our hurts to become the centerpieces of our life. And then we build these walls,
Mhm.
you know, to keep it
It's so
in.
true. Yeah.
Trying to defend ourselves. We're trying to fill the emptiness and numb the pain.
Mm.
The third task of grief, he said, is we have to adjust to a new environment without. So without the one we loved,
Mhm.
without the dream we had, without the pregnancy this time, without whatever we so yearned for, right? So, because we had deeply invested something emotionally,
Mm.
and now there's that empty place. And so now we have to learn to tell a new story and invest again eventually. Now, there's some usually grief, it takes about 2 years, but there's some complicated grief that takes longer,
Mm.
right? This is my third try and I lost the baby again. If it's the death of a child, that's usually a very complicated grief and it takes longer. We have to forge new things, as we look ahead. And often we don't want to do this. I just want to go back. I want to be
Yeah.
normal. I don't want to live like this.
Yeah.
So one of our then significant tasks here, excuse me, is to construct meaning out of our pain.
Mm.
And God loves to bring meaning in our suffering. As we keep surrendering, to keep trusting, we keep finding, you're so good. You're so good. You're so good. And your way is better. It doesn't feel better. I don't like it. Oh, you're so good. And I trust you.
Yes. That's good.
So however that loss has really challenged us, we need to construct new meaning or reconstruct sometimes. God takes that loss and it becomes this seed for new things to emerge. Jesus said that unless the seed goes into the ground, it dies. It abides alone. But if it dies, it can emerge and bring much fruit. So
Amen.
one of the little books I love was written probably late 1940s by a man named Viktor Frankl. It's been a bestseller every year since, called Man's Search for Meaning.
So good.
Viktor Frankl was a Viennese Austrian psychotherapist, and he started his own school of psychotherapy called logotherapy because he went against Freud, because Freud said we are motivated by pleasure. That's our main motivation. And Frankl said, no, we're motivated by meaning. So he was in the States. He was lecturing, he and his wife. She was pregnant. But things are really heating up because of the Nazis coming across Europe. And he went back to Austria because of his parents and brother and sister. They got captured, put in concentration camps. His father, his mother, his brother, and his pregnant wife all died in the concentration camps. And he was in 4 different concentration camps. He survived. And 3 months later, he came out of the concentration camp and was lecturing because he said, the meaning of my life is to help other people find meaning. And here's what he said 3 months after years in concentration camp. I mean, they starved him, all the horrors, and losing everyone he loved, except his sister escaped. He said, life is beautiful and life is meaningful.
Wow.
Right. And he was Jewish and he was a committed Jew, but I don't know what he knew of the Lord. I know he read the Psalms, but life is beautiful and life is meaningful on top of all of that loss. He was able to say that. So we have to construct new meaning. And the fourth thing that Warden says is we invest in the reality of new life and we begin turning more toward the new and toward what we can have and toward what the Lord is planning in new dreams than we turn to the past. We remember and we grieve some, but it's not so acute and it's not so intense. Pain often reduces us to the agenda of the Spirit. And
that's very good.
And I think that's not original with me, but in Habakkuk 3:17 and 18, he says, there's the figs aren't producing. There's no figs on the tree, and there's no grapes on the vine, and there's no olives, and there's no sheep or cattle in the pen. It's loss. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord, for the sovereign Lord is my strength. Yet I will rejoice. And that's what really writes a new story for us, is the Yet I will turn to you.
Yes.
Yet I will trust you. You are my Emmanuel, always with me.
So good.
That is beautiful. Barbara, thank you so much. Thank you.
You
Thank
are
you.
so
I am
welcome.
just, my heart is encouraged. And I know our
Yes.
listeners are just going to be so blessed by you. And just thank you for helping us find our voice within grief. And
Good.
especially those 4 tasks. I thought that really, that was the first time I had heard that. And
Me too.
so that is just, oh
Uh-huh.
man, it brings so
His
much
book,
peace for me.
his book. Oops, I didn't write it down. But it's William Warden, W-R-D-N.
Okay,
And
we will definitely put that in the show notes
I think
for everybody.
he
Yeah.
hit it right. Yeah, I think he's got it.
Yes.
I loved
Barbara,
being with
yes,
you.
we are just
Yes.
so
You
grateful
are
for
a
you.
gift. Yes. Sweet Barbara. She just like calms me. Calm,
I
sweet,
know. I'm like,
Jesus filled lady. I
talk to her
like
all
her.
day. Yes. I love it.
His
Thanks again,
presence and
Barbara.
his peace.
Yes, his
Yes.
presence and his peace. Friends, thank you
I
so
love
much for
that.
joining us on this episode of the Purpose Beyond Motherhood podcast. We are so grateful that you are listening. If you need anything at all, please know that we are here for you. Find us
Yes.
online at weare1212.org. See you soon.